Greetings, this is Management 430, Human Resource Management, and in this competency lecture, we are going to talk about training and development, and associated with that, what it means to have a career and what a career looks like. And both employees and employers should be concerned about careers and helping employees to develop careers, but more importantly, knowing that training and development are so key to people's ability to have a career, to have the skills they need to be able to do a job. And what we know from most recent research is that training and development is key to engagement and retention. So when organizations are willing to invest in their workers through training and development, it has a direct impact on engagement, which has a direct impact on retention. So it is important that we understand how training works, how development works, and why careers matter. Training is really important strategically to organizations because it's a tool that we use to make sure we can have a direct impact on performance, and also to ensure that we can get workers up to skills for jobs now and into the future, and ultimately helps them to be integrated into the organization through onboarding processes. And onboarding is a part of training and development. So when an organization has a specific need for a skill set, which they have determined through their strategic planning initiatives, it is the role of the organization, the HR department, to do a needs analysis to figure out who has the skills. And if people have the skills, that's great. And if they don't, then they need to engage in a needs analysis and determine what specifically needs to be done for each of those employees to have the skills that are needed to be able to perform the new strategic initiatives. So these are all tied together. Training helps us achieve those needs. So we have to make sure that the training aligns with organizational goals. The last thing we want to be doing is training people for the sake of training them when it's not related to the most important thing, which is to be able to engage in training and development, and to be able to meet the goals of the organization through training and development. But training also has to meet an employees' needs, like training and development, the development side of things particularly. When people imagine the jobs that they want to do, the career that they want to have, it's really important for us to think about, can we take into account not just what I need as the organization, but what my employees need as well. Because when I am meeting their needs, while simultaneously meeting my needs, we have a win-win relationship, and that increases the likelihood of better performance and better engagement in the organization. So we shouldn't ignore what the employee wants or needs. We need to take that into account. Training, when it is done well and when it is done in alignment with the organization's goals, strategic initiatives, the payoff can be huge. In fact, when we talk about training evaluation in a bit, we have to you'll see how it can be a win-win, not just for the employee, it's the employer, it's the economy, all involved, and it can do a good return on investment for the organization. So how do we decide what needs to be done? Well, we start with a needs analysis or a needs assessment. We go in, we look at the organization, we look at the jobs, we look at the people, and we look at the strategic initiatives of the organization to determine what is needed, why it is needed, and how we are going to then start thinking about implementing the training program that is needed. Sometimes there is a problem, and when we investigate it, it leads to a need for training, and sometimes it doesn't. The goal is for you to be open-minded and to not necessarily assume that any time there's an organizational problem, that if you just train people, it'll all be better. Now, I will argue, of course, truthfully, that not enough organizations do a good job of training, so sometimes that is exactly true. But more often than not, even if the company is trying their best to do a good job with training, they assume that a training program is the be all and end all, that it fixes all the problems. And it doesn't necessarily do that. What matters is that we have to investigate to see, is it a training issue? Is it a selection issue? Is it a compensation issue? Is it a communication issue? There's all sorts of issues that could be at play here, and we need to investigate it and be open and willing to recognize when the organization may have dropped the ball on something that means it's not necessarily a training problem, but it might be a morale problem or a culture problem. So the needs analysis is so important to do right, because then it directs us where we need to go when we are ready to implement a solution, whatever that solution might be. We want to make sure we're not resting on assumptions, as it says there, and it helps keep us focused, whether the focus is on what aspect of HR needs to be changed in order to address the problem. But that's the goal, right? If we look at it broadly, that's not going to help us. We've got to investigate all the areas, but then the solution is not broad. The solution is very focused on exactly what the problem is. So I'm going to assume from here on out in these lectures that we're going to talk about, when we talk about a needs analysis, that it's about a training need, that's the most important thing that is going on. So one aspect of the needs analysis or a needs assessment is the organizational analysis. Again, we start with understanding the goals and the strategies of the company. It always starts there. We need to make sure we understand that. Then we've got to look at the organizational culture. Then we look at resources that are available for people. Do people have enough resources to be able to do their job? If so, then there's other issues. If not, then that may be the source of your problem, is not having enough resources for people to do what they need to do. And we also need to look then at the organizational environment, how it impacts the organization itself and its culture and its goals and strategies. Next, we have to analyze the tasks and the job, and that requires us to do job analysis, which often the organization has already accomplished. They at least know what the jobs are, what the tasks are for those jobs. However, if we are designing new jobs, if we are developing new opportunities, or we're making major changes to those jobs, then we need to make sure that we have updated the job descriptions by doing a good job analysis. We dive in and look at where there may be changes and needs for KSAOs, and then we take that into account as we consider what needs to be done to solve the training problem. The last leg of this three-legged stool is the person analysis, where we actually look at the skills that the individuals have. Now, how do we do that? Well, we should be keeping track of skill set that people have when we hire them, right? We should have access to any certifications that they have, any trainings that they've engaged in while working for the company. But we assess those skills coming in, so we should have a good record of what their skill set is. We know how we've trained them and in what areas we've trained them, so we know what those skills are. And this is what is central, right, for us to do any kind of dashboard, right, to make sure we've got a good dashboard that keeps track of the KSAs for our employees. Because once we decide we need this skill or that skill, we have to first go to our internal resource planning, ERP, our resource planning software, to figure out what is missing, what people don't have. And then that feeds into, well, if we need this skill and we have nobody in the company that can do it, then we need to move forward from there. Now, if we don't have the information, what do? Well, supervisors should be fairly up to speed on what their employees can do if they are doing a good job of managing that. So sometimes what they'll need to do is have conversations with their employees and be able to identify, oh, you need so-and-so to do something. they have the skill to do that. We talked about it the other day. They said they did this at a previous job, even if it doesn't reflect in our job description or their hiring packet, so I know that they have that skill. This is why a good manager has to be connected with their employees. They have to know what their strengths and weaknesses are. They have to know what skills they have that they bring to the table. So when we do the person analysis, it's what are the skills that need to be managed, which employees need it, and recognizing that everybody should get the same training or should they get custom training. And there are some situations where custom training might work best because I might need a skill in this area, but somebody else needs a skill in another area. So I'm not necessarily going to do a blanket, training that everybody gets the same training, and recognizing that some people have varied skills and some people need more than others and some people need less than others. Other things that we have to do, of course, in all this analysis is gather data, look at performance appraisals, look at skill set, look at any kind of surveys that we've done that gives us a broader sense, a de-identified sense of what's going on with climate and motivation and things like that, and satisfaction. And all of that information is used in our person analysis to know that even if I don't know specifically which employee is dissatisfied, my survey told me 50% of my employees are dissatisfied with the job, or they're unhappy with their boss, or they are concerned about pay, whatever that might be. So we use all the tools in the toolbox. We use all the data that we have available to us, and we use this in a more comprehensive needs analysis to make that happen. Some additional things that we would want to gather in our person analysis is the demographics of our trainees, right? Age, education, demographic data. Everybody learns a little differently, and generationally there are some clear differences in how people learn. Younger folks are more comfortable with computer-based education and things like that. Older workers like more hands-on kinesthetic training as a rule. Now, obviously, there's variance within each group, but it is important for us to understand what the needs are for our employees, understanding those demographics, because they will guide us towards determining the best training mechanisms for our employees.